So I think a modern circus story sounds interesting and challenging because if you set it back in time, it just feels like a lot of other circus stories we've seen. So I like adding like a social media angle. Obviously, he's like, this guy's like, you know why other circuses don't work? Because I've got real talent here. I've got real people with real powers. So I'm the last circus that's going to be around.
I'm like Professor X.
Oh, that's a really funny line. I'm like Professor X, but I can walk.
Yeah.
And I have hair.
Yeah, and he actually has like a toupee that gets like blown off at the end.
Welcome to StoryFellas, the podcast where we make stories and break stories. I'm your host, Tommy Antonucci.
And I'm your host, Zach Lovelace.
Zach, how are you doing this fine morning?
I'm good, man. I got my coffee in hand. I got my little setup here. I'm in the corner of the back room. I'm trying to be a little quiet, but I can bust a gut laughing, so I wake up my whole family.
Yeah, and then you never get to record this podcast again.
Exactly. How about you, man?
Zach, I'm doing well. I've got my cup of tea here, and I didn't know you were I thought you were a tea guy in the morning, but I just don't. I wake up right before this, so I don't have time to make my coffee because we don't have a coffee maker. We use all the manual methods. So nice. I roll out of bed. I just throw a tea bag in the water, and I roll over here, man.
Nice. I was thinking about tea, but I told Kate that I would make coffee, so I did all like a pour over. I ground the beans and everything. I hope it didn't wake her up, but if it did, she has coffee.
That sounds like a fun sketch where it's like just a super sweet. It's like, don't worry, honey, I'm gonna make you coffee, and then it's the loudest grinder ever. It's like construction work happening in the mixer.
The beans are stuck.
Do you have a jackhammer?
Yeah, it gets the flavor out.
The beans are stuck. You call the cops and they start shooting at your grinder. Don't worry, honey.
The husband starts like cussing at the beans. He's mother.
Oh man! And then the sweet music comes back, and you walk in with a cup of. You're like, here you go, honey.
He spills the piping hot coffee on her.
All right, there's your story, guys. We did it.
That was it. That's man. Sketches and skits. They boom. They come easy.
Yeah, we should do a sketch episode sometime because we also have not done. Well, I don't know unless we change the order of these. We've not done a comedy yet. We need to go out of our way to do a comedy or some funny sketches because I think we have so much fun doing that. And naturally, a lot of our episodes have just led to dramas or adventures, which is fine.
I have one to share with you right now. I literally thought of this last night, and it made me laugh out loud. So you'll get a glimpse in my brain here. If it doesn't make you laugh, that's fine.
Right.
Have you seen those videos of actors and stuff, and they're like in a white room, and it's like Robert Downey Jr. reads the Google's top searches for him, and they have a little board and they peel the thing off. And I thought about doing that. I have to think of an impression that I could do of somebody because I'd want to like pretend to be whoever it is. But the thing is like the top search thing is like, is Zach Lovelace gay? And he's like, yeah, it's me, obviously, but it's like, no, I'm not gay, And then the next one is like, does Zach Lovelace like men? And he's just like, no. I mean, this is funny. This 1 and 2 is the top. Wow. I mean, people have nothing better to search, I guess. And the last one is like, does Zach Lovelace's parents know that he's gay? And just getting caught, like trying not to laugh and like trying not to get mad kind of thing. I don't know. It was making me.
That's actually I think that's a funny parody of that thing where this guy's just super avoidant. And he's like, what is this all people are searching about?
And eventually he gets mad. Yeah.
You're like, I just won an Oscar.
Yeah.
And this is what everyone's searching?
Man.
I like that. I think that's a funny sketch.
So take that as a teaser, audience, of our sketch episode, whenever that is.
I've got some sketch ideas I've recently thought of, and I want to pitch them to you, but this whole episode will become sketch ideas if we do that. So we'll save that for a future one. But I want to do a story scraps and bring some of my scraps to the table. And it's a little different because I don't have a morsel. I have a giant chunk of scraps.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. So back when I was in film school, we were assigned during a semester to write a 90-page feature.
Okay.
And it's funny because there were like 40 people in my class, and I think only me and one other student got that assignment done.
Whoa.
With everything else that we were assigned to do.
Yeah.
And I only got it done because I got mono and I went home sick. And so the only thing I had to do was write this feature. And I think they readjusted after that because they're like, if 38 people weren't able to get this done, maybe it says something more about how we've got this scheduled than.
Still, man, I like that. I wish I had somebody holding an A over my head to force me to write.
Yeah, so I got mine done, which was cool. Great exercise, loved it. It was super cool to feel like, oh man, I wrote 90 pages. I wrote a 90-page story. But obviously, being early in my storytelling career and being under a deadline, I like it. I like the bones of the story and kind of the idea, but it feels like there's some aspects of it that are kind of Kid Glove-esque that are just like on the surface. I'm like, I feel like this is kind of a little cheesy, or these characters aren't that. It's undercooked. So I've always thought
you're serving me raw meat.
Yep, basically. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to serve us some raw meat, and we're going to see if we can bake it a little better. So I don't know if you want kind of all the story beats, or if you want kind of more the log line, and we kind of just recreate from the beginning.
Yeah, I think, and then just feed me things as we go. I think is probably the easiest thing. Like throw them as obstacles at me, and we'll see if we can navigate it.
Yeah, well, the log line is, off the top of my head, a young mind reader embarks on a cross-country road trip to discover how to put himself in the story instead of standing on the sidelines.
Okay.
So it's kind of a story, like small town. We have this, I don't know, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid, something like that, who has the ability to read minds. And this is very Tommy-esque of just having a story where someone has some sort of conceit or power. And how I defined this guy was he was very bored, because there was no surprise in life. He knew all the people in a small town. He knew what they were thinking. He knew what they were about. He knew what was coming. So he finds a lot of solace in books. And kind of is just a spectator to his own life. Doesn't really know what to do. He's just kind of, and then when he gets caught up in this very happy-go-lucky guy, and meeting him, he's going to visit his sister in California, and convinces this guy. He finds out his ability, and he's like, hey, you should come with me. And it's just kind of like a coming of age story.
Yeah, that sounds like a good genre to kind of plop it down in. I kind of understand that. A road trip as well. It sounds like a road trip movie.
Yeah. So that's the base level of things. And as we go on, I can share where I went wrong with certain things, where I'm like, I should not have taken the story this way or that way. But the rough version is he gets on this road trip with this guy. Along the way, they pick up another girl, hitchhiker, and then there's the love interest, and it's kind of these three people on their road trip.
Okay.
So I want to explore this and see if we can put some better meat on the bones, just because.
Yeah.
And I'll do the parallels as we go along, to state what I did last time that I feel like I need to correct this time around. But I want to hear your initial response. What is interesting? What directions do you naturally feel you could take a story like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're asking Dr. Love, the script doctor.
Dr. Love, you're on the phone with Dr. Love on the line.
Yeah, they call me Dr. Love. Script Dr. Love over here. My initial reaction is I can tell it's kind of a first draft, especially the log line. I know you were just reciting it from memory, so I'm not going to grade you on that necessarily, but just that
Zach just hangs up.
Yeah. Sorry, kid. I don't care if it's 99 pages. You failed. No, I like the mind reading thing. I've thought about how to make mind reading interesting. Because as a power, it does get kind of relegated to the backseat, especially compared to something like Wolverine. Like, ooh, you can read my mind. But also, it says a lot about human nature from what and we're exploring that a little bit, that he's bored. And I think that's an interesting place to start with a character. You would want him to be way more active. So you obviously threw him into the coming of age thing to make him more active. I would say like we would want to start as close to the action as possible. So whether it's him first getting his powers and that's what's causing him to come to age, or basically coming of age, causing him to mature, or he's come from a long line of mind readers, so he has to he wants to get out of the house to kind of find himself. Everybody he grew up in a home where everybody knew what he was thinking all the time, basically flipping the concept a little bit on its head, because you're saying that the townspeople are who he knows everybody, he knows all of their little schemes and whatever. So I would say the strongest elements are the mind reading, the coming of age aspect, and the love interest. I think that's interesting, and the road trip, give or take, depending on what we can maybe drape onto that, like where are they going and why,
Yeah, we when I first wrote this, I got to the end, and all of my three main characters, I was thinking, these guys are boring. These guys are all really boring. And it made me think, if I took another pass at this, because I don't think I even mentioned the main character in this is named Cadby.
Okay, Cadby. Nice.
Cadby.
It's a good name.
Because I liked that name. I thought it was interesting. He doesn't really have any major faults. He's just kind of like a blank canvas guy.
Well, that's why he's boring.
Bored.
He wants nothing, and boring people or bored people are boring. The phrase goes, interesting people are interesting. If I go off on my Antarctic exploration thing, like I did last episode, I've done that to people just at work and stuff, and they find it really interesting, even though they might not care for that in their own time. It's just people who are zeroed in on something and can offer some form of expertise. And I'm not claiming to be an expert, but you know what I mean? Like, I like reading about this, and therefore I can talk about it for a long time.
Yeah, I thought it could be interesting bringing him, because I thought if I ever took another pass, one avenue I could take is, instead of him just being purely bored, it's take it a few notches higher, and he's kind of a jerk. Like, he's so kind of jaded by like knowing what people's innermost thoughts, and just thinking, it's like, the mailman's a bad guy. Like, he's a bad guy, and just him just kind of not being fun to be around, because he's just sees everyone's inner life.
Yeah, and he says nothing but truth. He's got no love.
Yeah. Yes, and I know that creates the challenge of having a protagonist that's not super likable right off the bat, but that's like the Iron Man thing of like taking a guy who's not great.
If he solved some of the town's problems, I think that would make him more likable. He like is solving crimes or something, working with the police department.
Yeah, he's like, come on, guys. Originally, no one knew. It was like a secret thing. And I kind of had this whole thing. There's this shoehorned part of my story that I feel, if we can make it make sense, cool, but I don't think it will work. Because I had this whole sci-fi element where like people discover him and then people are after him for his ability. And in hindsight, I was like, I feel like I'm telling too many stories here between like the coming of age. So I want to like cut that out completely. I don't think we need that aspect.
And that kind of plays against type for you. You want the mundane to really come in contact with the strange, as opposed to like, hey, there's a whole government agency dedicated to. That's actually kind of mundane. The idea that there's pencil pushers somewhere who are like, there are mind readers, and I'm gonna catch them, and I need this form, this W-2.
Yeah, I need this W-2 to catch him. Yeah, like I said, this was a first draft of a story years ago, so I think I fell into a lot of first feature writing. So I think I fell into a lot of traps of like, obviously there needs to be a government agency chasing him.
Well, it makes it easier to write because you've seen that movie 1,000 times, so I get it.
Yeah, so no government agency, and yeah, because of that, it makes it more possible to explore the idea of maybe this is a well-known, or like in the local town, people know that he can do this stuff, and no one really bats an eye. Because before, if I have people chasing him, you have the superhero problem. I can't have him publicly known because it makes it really overly simple to catch him. But if no one's after him, then it's like, okay, yeah, maybe the local people know. And like when people visit town, they're like, wait, what do you mean he can read minds? They're like, he just can do it. He helped us solve a crime the other day, and he was able to figure out this. And then it's just this jaded guy who just like, yeah, he helps, but he's like also not that enthused about helping. He's like still bored with everything.
Well, if you're cool with that setup still, like, well, I'll back up a second. What is it that if I had an eraser in hand and I said, I'm going to erase whatever you tell me not to keep, what would you be like? This is what I want to see.
Yeah, that's a good question. The core of the story that was in the original version that I would also like in this version is the idea of not being subjected to the sidelines. I grew up super introverted, and it was just that like, oh man, I just like that. I'm much more extroverted now, but back then it was like, man, I wish someone would just start a conversation with me. And this character, I have this idea of like, he's lonely. He doesn't know how to connect with people because of this ability. Like it almost gives him too much, so he can't actually like personally relate to people in a good way.
Yeah.
And it's this story of like, hey, you got something worth sharing, so go share it. Like be the main character in your story and live your life and share what you have to share, rather than just sitting silently on the sidelines. So that's kind of the core message that I think is the inspiration for this story.
Okay.
Of just this kind of, hey, everybody has value. Everybody has something to say, thing.
Okay.
And it's kind of empowers him to make friends, empowers him to see value in other people instead of seeing them as just an obstacle or some jaded person that he doesn't like.
Okay. And that's the main thing. Is there anything else?
I feel like that's the big main thing, and then the story around it can fluctuate. Like I said, this first draft, all the characters were kind of surface level characters, and I think I need to make all of these guys have big flaws. Like they probably don't get along at first, and they aren't great people. They aren't like your classic Hallmark protagonists, and I think that would naturally make things more interesting.
Yes,
to have them
the
have
conflict,
a lot of problems.
And usually the conflict, because you have to ask who's the antagonist in that. Probably the circumstances that they're running into. But I'll back up a second. I think why this story has become a scraps thing for you, this is just, again, Dr. Love here, is that the one sentence that you provided has contradiction in it. So he wants to be known and understood. He doesn't want to be lonely, yet he has this power where he can pretty much be inside of anybody's head. That basically, he's not an underdog, but you want him to be an underdog. Like he wants to be moved from the outside to the inside. He wants to be part of the party, basically. And that is somewhat contradictory because it's not really, but do you understand what I mean? Like you want to have this feeling for him, yet the situation that you've designed for him doesn't make that feeling happen. Yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. It's one of those things that when you've written it and you're just like, yeah, that's how the story goes. It's hard to separate and be like, but that's a good point. So I guess an avenue could be, we need to make him an underdog somehow. Yes. Like force it, or we change the story a little bit where it's not an underdog story. Like we kind of change how we're presenting him. Yep. Those are your two avenues. If you want to keep it to be generally identifiable to yourself. Otherwise you're changing it at an atomic level. And I think that's where you you won't recognize it. But yeah, I would say it'd be easier to make him an underdog.
Yeah. Would you do you think it's just adding more obstacles to him? Like,
I think it's just adding certain elements to him. I don't know if he necessarily needs to be. He just needs to be really needs to be an outcast, and you need to show that. But not because of himself necessarily. I think that's the. Although I get it because you want him to kind of rise above it, but then that makes everyone in the town seem prejudiced. Why would he actually care? You know, it's like something he can't help, or something he can help. You know, I'm talking in generalities here, but
yeah, it could be the thing where I think an avenue you could take it is he tries to help, but people are turned off by him reading their minds. Like, they obviously, as anyone would, like the townspeople find out. And while he's trying to assist and aid in things and help people and help police departments, like, people just are generally not that comfortable with him because they're worried that he's going to read their minds and no one wants to like reveal their darkness or their sin or whatever. Like, they don't like him around for that reason.
Yeah, so he exposes them.
And and maybe it is something I like where you said, I never imagined like he only speaks the truth. Maybe that's like an actual character thing. Like, maybe he can't lie. Like, part of his ability is he's like, yeah, I can read minds, but I can't. Like, I'm always open about it. Like, I can't lie about what I've seen or anything like that. So then
I like that his honesty, it's the double-edged sword thing that your greatest strength is usually connected to your flaw, is that he needs to learn how to speak in love for people and not out of resentment. I think what's popping in my head now is something that could be interesting. We open with a narration, which narration is usually kind of not favorable in terms of writing. It's not fashionable anymore, but I think you could lean into the comedic side of this and have him say like, hey, I can read minds. And so you're going to listen to my thoughts. And so can you. You're listening to my thoughts right now. And, you know, whatever, he can monologue about that. But I imagine a scene where he's like 8 years old. And he's like, my powers manifested pretty early on. And as far as I know, doesn't run in the family. And you see him in elementary school at like a school pageant or a school play or something like that. And he's up on stage, you know, doing something cute. And then he sees the principal and he's like, he's stealing money. And it's endearing to you. It's this, because you see him as a child, but then it becomes less endearing to the town because that same kind of thing keeps happening. And now he's, you know, at first it was a wonder. At first, he was solving crimes as a kid or whatever. To kind of have that set up, it feels like the story's pretty big at that point. Like, in terms of scope of his life, you'd really want to jump into the action coming out of a montage like that, seeing him grow up. You know, now he's kind of in his status quo of being a town loser, and everyone's just like, shut up. You know, or maybe they have figured out a way to wear aluminum foil hats or something when he's around, and so they all have them. And it maybe doesn't stop him from reading people's minds, but it makes them feel better, and he's just started to pretend that it doesn't work. I like the idea, and I think I've seen this kind of character in media before, where maybe we have that montage of his life, and like you said, it starts out as a wonder, and people are like, this is amazing. And then as he's gradually getting older, people are like, okay, yeah, kid, yeah, whatever. And but it's still a useful thing. But I picture him, maybe he's like early 20s instead. And maybe he works for the police department, or maybe he works for some like weird private eye guy as his assistant. And it's one of those things where people find his skill useful, but they kind of also hate him for it. Like, I imagine some scene where if he's there and he's like helped sell, he's like, you know, that guy's lying. He was definitely not there. And then they like drag the guy to the cell, and then they're like wrapping up, and he's like, and they're
you get the like two cops or something are like, hey man, you want to get a drink after work and yada yada yada, and then the guy walks in and they're like, yeah, like it's very clear like nobody wants him around for the same reason they want to employ him or utilize his talent.
That's interesting.
Like because then it's like, okay, he's not like a complete outcast. It's kind of I've seen some of Attack on Titan, and there's like a whole people group like that are like useful to a population, but like also despised. Like they're viewed as lesser people.
That feels very Japanese, like class wise.
Yeah, which I don't think, like, this is not full class wise, but I think there could be something where he's trying to put his best foot forward, and he finds like he's like, oh, I am useful, but he's not liked. People don't like him, and people don't want to spend time with him. And so he doesn't really have any like social life or friends, and he kind of just does his job, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess I go home again. And then we have some sort of inciting incident that moves things along, that helps him. Maybe he meets like the traveler or something.
Yeah, I think I probably have seen this before, so I don't know. But the girl, the love interest, I feel like that's probably the way to go. He can't read her mind.
Yep, that's actually in the first draft, man.
Yeah,
he can't read her mind.
So,
and that's also a little bit. I know that's a line from Twilight as well, where he's like, I can't read your mind. I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, and that's attractive to him, you know. But even then, you could show him like trying to go on dates. You know, he's got like a Tinder or something, and he's like, I like them when I see their pictures and stuff because I can't read their mind. You know, but when I meet them in person, I know exactly what they're thinking, and or maybe even says it doesn't take a mind reader to see that there's nothing going on in this girl's head, you know, or whatever.
Yeah,
and not like in a good way.
There's just crickets in there, man.
Yeah, he's like, I'm reading your mind, but I can't tell if there's just no thoughts in there or, you know.
And we're picking at this thing and figuring out what works best. I don't anticipate us to get to like a full conclusion, but this is already helping.
Yeah, if you find an engine, again, if the character gets to the point where you feel like, okay, they are this type of guy, then Cadby is this type of person, then all you need to do is just take him to the end, like invert him, he overcomes his flaw. So you give him what he needs, not necessarily what he wants, but giving him what he wants will give you the plot, or like giving him something to want, whether it's like, hey, a traveling salesman. If this feels really like Tim Burton-y, like Edward Scissorhands, which might be interesting to take it this way, but there's like a traveling salesman. He's like, are you a mind reader? Each town probably has one. You know, come one, come all. Like, buy this thingy doodle thing, whatever it is, this helmet, and it'll make you not a mind reader anymore. And it makes, you know, he goes after it, finally gets it, and then realizes he doesn't want it. You know, it's that whole thing where he gets what he wants, and he's like, oh, this, you know, but I actually did belong. I actually did have a use in my town. And there's something about really, truly loving someone is very connected to understanding what makes them flawed, but loving them anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think changing the genre to some degree could also help, because I picture this more as like a drama coming of age story, but sometimes I'm picturing with some of the scenes you're describing more of like a stylized rom-com, something like 500 Days of Summer or something, because like that scene of montage of him on dates and like really botching them seems really funny to me. Yeah. Like where it's just like really like, it's just like single, almost Wes Anderson style. Like he's like, oh yeah. So, and he just says this embarrassing thing. It's like stuff he shouldn't know, and then the people getting offended, or it's one girl who's like just thinking about crickets, or it's just elevator music coming from her head or something like that.
I got it. I got a really cute way to get around the mind reading thing that he could find interesting. It's a novel way to introduce, like, he can't read this girl's mind. She just doesn't speak English.
Oh, okay. Okay, so she's just, so he can like read it, but it's just like just he doesn't speak the language at all.
Yeah, so he's like, I still don't know what you're saying. You know. And here's a question: Does his power happen inadvertently, or does he have to kind of like push to make it happen?
I think it kind of just happens. In the first draft, it was through the power of movie making, through the visual medium of movie making. It's more of, which we could always take it, a more of a auditory thing, but it's more of a visual thing. Like, we, the audience, see the things that manifest in the world. So like, if he's like talking to someone and they're like dreaming, like, or like, I don't know, they're like, oh man, I saw this girl and she was like so hot at the place. Like, we, the audience, and Cadby see the girl like walk through the coffee shop, but no one else sees it. Or it's like someone's thinking of trains and he sees like a train like go through the thing, because I think that's interesting. Yeah, it's just, I think that adds like some interesting visual interest, and it's not purely just like, oh, I can hear what you're thinking. It's more just like he sees things that are going on in people's heads.
That makes sense.
And then with this girl, it's like kind of this like more confusion. Like, it's everything's unclear, like kaleidoscope-esque, where it's like he doesn't get anything concrete from her, but it's more just like, wow, there's something interesting. Yeah. Like, I get concrete stuff from everyone else, but not you.
Leaning into the Tim Burton angle again, which I think feels really appropriate here. It does adds a wrinkle, some texture to this world, because it is a little offbeat. It's got big fish type feel to it,
It does have that kind of Tim Burton. The way I always describe him is like, the one crazy aspect of the world is the least scary and crazy thing of the world. Usually like the main, like he's like the most, like, you're like, I want to hang out with him. But then all the people in the town, you're like, these people are such weirdos.
Yeah. And that's his thing, is like taking examining how weird the normal is by the abnormal. So, but I think if this girl spoke a very rare language, that could be interesting. Where she's like one of the last speakers of this Mayan tongue or something, and her dad, or maybe adoptive dad, depending on how that works, is the ringleader to the one selling this device. And so he kind of gets wrapped up in this circus-y type thing, like traveling salesman guy, and he goes along with him. Again, this is the coming of age thing, but it's primarily because of the girl, and that's basically it. Is like, he falls in love with her. They eventually become an item. They break it off, and then maybe they get back together in the end. But then they go back to his town or something like that. Like, I don't know. There's a couple little variations within that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, having her tied to this guy, because it almost sounds like in this version of the story, this traveling salesman guy, this kind of weird witch doctor-esque dude, is our antagonist a little bit. I get Pinocchio,
totally
puppeteer guy vibes.
Maybe she tells him like, that's not my dad. Like, she like can't speak English, so I was like obviously having a hard time communicating with him.
I do think it might be tricky to like have one of our main characters not speak English at all. Well, I don't know if
people say this, people who speak English as a second language, they still think in their first
I think she has to speak a little bit of English.
It's
like
broken.
Enough to like, it's broken, and okay. As long as she can speak a little, I'm like, I don't know how the story's going to progress if he's like, there's just no, like, she can't speak to him at all.
It's a fun obstacle to throw in there, because that's your character has to learn to overcome that. That's what's interesting. That's what I want to see how he overcomes this. So, just throwing a little bit more of the kind of warped, off kilter stuff in there, but making it really grounded. Again, this guy's like the dad in Matilda. Just kind of a sleazy guy. And so again, the more wild elements are unattractive to the normal people in the world, like the mind reader kid Cadby.
Yeah, I feel like him meeting this guy, because this guy's probably just a weirdo. He's an outcast himself, because like a guy going town to town being like, protect yourself from mind readers. It's not gonna be like super well received.
That would also be funny if he's like, protect yourself from mind readers, and there's like a mind reading kind of bigotry thing happening there a little bit, but Cadby pretends to not be a mind reader.
Okay.
to like
I was
to join up with him,
Yeah, I was thinking either that or this guy discovers, because he's like a con man clearly, and it's like it's kind of a dumb con, it's a weird con, but then he actually finds a real mind reader, and wants to employ him to scare people. Like he's like, oh no, if you come with me and people feel like, wait, this person did read my mind, like it will drive business up, and I'll split the pot. Which I don't know if our character as we defined him, but I feel like that could be a motivation, like feeling a bit wanted. Like this guy wants to hang out with him. He's like, you got to stick with me, kid.
Yeah.
And when no one else wants to spend time with him,
that's good.
Could be a motivating factor, even though it's like not a healthy relationship. This guy's clearly using him,
but he feels safe because he has this power, and he's like, I can tell that he's using me. But I think
he wants me around for it.
Yeah, and it would be interesting if you kind of push into him being the bad guy at the end, or maybe middle of the second act kind of break here, where the ringleader guy, for lack of a better term, is he reveals, he's like, oh yeah, I only let you hear what I want you to hear. Like some people can read minds, but I can tell you that like I can give you false thoughts. Like he has powers of his own a little bit, or maybe that he's like, yeah, over in Vietnam, I stepped on a landmine and I've had a piece of shrapnel in my mind ever since, and it protects me from you.
That's like such a wild thing to say, but it'd be really funny if it's true. Like he's like, man, I can't read. Yeah. I think that's interesting. And I think like it could be still his daughter, like his adopted daughter or something, like helps with his business and stuff. And like she's there because then that naturally gives him a reason to,
and she helps
he goes there for him. Yeah. And then she's like, hey, he's not a good dude.
I like that a lot too, because one is definitely actually an antagonist, but what your main character Cadby is learning at that point is that he goes from a place of being like, I thought I knew everything, to being like, oh, the world is a lot richer and deeper than I thought, and I actually want to go back to my normal, which is the hero's journey. He goes back to the normal, but with a clearer understanding of things, and so he can appreciate it. And there's this whole other world of freaks and geeks or whatever that he is encountered and it's exploited, and so like other people with other powers. I just think it'd be cool if eventually, like when the gig is up, or the jig is up or whatever, and the ringleader guy shows him, he's like, there's maybe like 2 or 3 other people that travel with him, and they also have powers. And so
maybe he's not just a salesman. So like maybe he's like basically a carny, like a traveling circus, and then like he still sells. He's like he uses Cadby as like a show where it's like this guy can read your mind, and then he has like some knickknacks where he's like, if you want to make sure you don't run into other mind readers, like he's like got headbands for people to like block it. But like his main thing is the show, because then that does introduce more of this cast of characters that are in a similar boat as him. That it's like, oh, they felt like outcasts, and they found some sort of home here. It's kind of like if you've watched The Greatest Showman.
I haven't.
It's like that. You haven't? Oh, okay. Well, it's funny. Some people don't love The Greatest Showman because the real history guy was not a good guy, but like they make Hugh Jackman like a likable guy in this, which is fine. But like basically that, like he collects all these people and he's like, oh, we're a family, but he's not a good guy. Like the guy is like, that's like the whole thing. His spiel. He's like, we're a family. We're working together, and I gave you a home, but he's really clearly using these people.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, do you think that this idea makes it necessary to set it in a different time period?
I think it could. Yeah, it seems like strange in the modern era.
I think if we found
I feel like something
way
like
to make
1800s or something. Yeah,
something like that. It definitely works, because the idea of the circus. It's funny, at work we have I work at an agency as a writer, and one of my clients is the Shriners. Did I talk about this last time?
I feel like you've told me this. I don't know if it's on the podcast or if it's
off air. I've told you about the Shriners. The Shriners are a little weird, and they run a circus. And what I've realized in the research for this circus that I'm writing for them is that circuses are dying, and generally they don't make a lot of money anymore. Like people, it seems like a thing of the past. So kind of tying it to this story, real life, would you want it to be set in a time period, like you said, 1800s or something? I think that could work, but I think it would be worth it to play with some ideas to get it to work in the now.
I think that makes sense. I think a modern circus story sounds interesting and challenging because if you set it back in time, it just feels like a lot of other circus stories we've seen. So I like adding like a social media angle. Obviously, he's like, this guy's like, you know why other circuses don't work? Because I've got real talent here. I've got real people with real powers. It's like I'm the last circus that's going to be around.
I'm like Professor X.
Oh, that's a really funny line. I'm like Professor X, but I can walk. Yeah. And I have hair.
Yeah, and he actually has like a toupee that gets like blown off at the end.
Yeah. I like him. He's like kind of this bumbling antagonist, but he's also like smart. Like he's like kind of secretly smart.
Yeah, I like
that
on
too. The
surface
surface, he's like kind of bumbling, and it's like this dude. And maybe that's why like people are like, yeah, he's kind of crazy, but I think he's harmless.
He feels manageable.
But he's actually
yeah.
It's like we can manage him, like all the guys with their special powers.
And there's some interesting commentary there where it's like the outsiders that kind of are stuck in this, for lack of a better way to describe it, the modern circus. What it is they find an identity, and so they like it even if it's a hated one. Like, okay, I feel like I belong somewhere, and if you're okay with being hated, then this is the place for you. And it's basically they are a thematic shade to Cadby because he's on the journey to overcome this, to see that the truth that he's revealing in people, that he has to love them regardless of that, and that actually will make for a deeper, richer. He's not judging them anymore, basically. Whereas these people haven't. They've basically judged the world and been like, yeah, this is what we are, and it's useful only to this end because it gives me purpose. I don't know. That's
I think a circus story, the main one I'm thinking of is The Greatest Showman. It deals with that kind of thing of like, oh, I have purpose and people are coming to see me, but it's struggling with the idea like, oh, it's only for the spectacle. Like, it's not for me, it's for the thing, and then people go home, and then I'm left here. So I think them dealing with that a little bit of finding some comfort in this group, but also being like, kind of fooling themselves that it's a family, and that could be where Cadby kind of comes in. He's like,
yeah, and
hey,
the girl,
you don't have to be treated this way and stuff.
Yeah, and he could liberate them, I think the girl could be interesting because she could be in the freak show where it's like she's the last girl of her tribe. I'm talking in the voice of the guy, obviously, the ringleader. So, she could still be one of them. She doesn't have to be his daughter, or maybe he could have formally adopted her.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he adopted her, but she's like, maybe they're all a little old. Maybe they're like early 20s. So it's not like she has to be there, but like she's been helping him with all this stuff for a while.
Yeah. I mean, that's her home. And ultimately, maybe she chooses to stay there, which is kind of the tragic love of what they have. But, she has shown Cadby that he's already loved somewhere else.
Yeah. Man, I really like this ringleader character. He's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
He seems like funny and dumb, and I think there could be a lot of play with that. What would make him, and we're running out of time, so
you're good.
We can wrap up in a few minutes, but what would make him menacing? Because I feel like I can generally understand the outline of Cadby. He's like not really wanting his hometown. He kind of discovers this dude, kind of gets roped in with his crew, starts traveling around, kind of falls in love with the girl. But like, what is the climax we are building towards? Because I feel like it's some sort of confrontation with him and this ringleader to some capacity, and it can be like a Disney level complication where like, I don't know, I don't think Cadby kills the guy to save everybody, but it's like you said, like there might be a chance like the girl like goes off with the ringleader, and she's like,
Well, so
he
to
needs
keep
me.
it very character centric, you would want Cadby to confront the version of himself. I mean, that's usually the villain, is a version of himself that responded differently to the world. And so he rejects that path, and that's the conflict, is like the villain says, you can't reject this. This is the only way that makes sense. Be a hero, Spider-Man, you know, that kind of thing. Like I could squash you like a bug. You know, it's that kind of thing that the villain usually has a painful reaction to the world, and so then wants to punish the world. Whereas the hero, you know, losing Uncle Ben, to keep with the Spider-Man thing, causes him to want to take responsibility and take the harder route of like, okay, yeah, I can't have a personal life. I can't date Mary Jane. Even though I want to, I have to forego these things. But it's worth it, as opposed to like, take what's yours. You're the strong one.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the whole. So in his town, he finds his value by his ability, but he doesn't really have much value besides that. And then he finds this ringleader that feels like it's offering more. This guy's offering more, but what he comes to find out is this guy's offering the same thing. Like there could be even a line. He's like, they're not going to like you if you're not on the stage. Like again, like this guy's fooled him, but it's the same thing. It's like you only have value for this ability. And then that's like the struggle. He's like, his arc, Cadby's arc, is him realizing he's like, I have so much more to offer. There's like more, like I have a voice and I'm a person. I have value.
Yeah. Especially if I just love my townspeople. Like if I have learned to love them and learned that I actually had something good going for me, I was just being too judgmental. Like basically the ringleader would say like, you need to judge them before they judge you. So he's been burned by all these people. And I think that's actually tying back to the villain thing I was talking about, that the ringleader probably once was a mind reader. And that his town, he pissed them off so much. Maybe he said like he told this town that this man was cheating on his wife. But in reality, he's like, there's two ways to go with this. That happens. The guy then gets mad at him. And so then he shoots him, and it's like lodged in his head, or like hits him over the head, and he loses his powers. But he decides to kind of leverage that, knowing that there are other people like him out there, give them a home free from judgment, that kind of thing. And in the end, Cadby learns to judge himself for his behavior rather than others. But I like that. And that would be the origin story that you hear from the ringleader, and you hear like a certain version of it. And maybe later on, the girl, the Aztec girl, whatever you want to call her, she tells Cadby that like, oh no, he's making that up. Like the ringleader made up that story. Like he either made it up entirely, or he just wanted to be with that woman. And so he just made up this idea that this man was cheating on his wife. So he like abused his powers and abused people's trust in his ability to read minds, to say like, no, I know this. So he like falsely accused a guy. I don't know. I kind of like that wrinkle to it. I don't know how you would use it necessarily, other than like,
I like that a lot too, because I feel like early on in the film there could be like a sit down heart to heart with Cadby where the guy is telling the story, and Cadby, because I like the idea of him being a mind reader in the past, and that is the reason he can influence like what Cadby sees
and sees the value in Cadby.
Yeah, but I see that he's like telling the story, and it's very heartfelt, and then Cadby's like seeing it play out before him, like seeing a younger version of the ringleader be like run out of town for like trying to help and stuff, and he's like really empathizes him to that. And then later it's he talks to the Aztec girl or whoever, and she's like, no, that's not true, and like maybe she was there, but she was like young. And like she has to like really work to like, because he has trouble like reading her mind, and like she's like trying to communicate it, and then like she's able to kind of with some effort communicate this visual, and then he sees what actually happened. And I like that parallel of like and then he realizes he's been lied to, and this guy is just angry at the world.
Yeah. And he breaks up with that guy rather than the girl. So it's not really like a romantic story anymore, which is fine. Maybe the girl goes home with him, you know, like, and the circus kind of disbands, or maybe the people keep going. I thought a way to make her more interesting is that she can speak 1,000 languages or something like that. And so she's choosing to just think in certain languages rather than not being able to speak English.
Yeah. No, I think that's fun because that adds a bit more of the wonder to it. Like, because like if you've got like mind readers and I don't know, a stretchy guy or something, and then you're like, she's the last of her tribe. It's like, it feels like that's not on par with some of these other things.
Well, maybe that's how he's selling her. You know, he's like, she can speak dead languages. It's called being a polyglot. That's somebody who knows, I think, 3 or more languages. But she would be like a super polyglot. She can speak every language on earth.
Yeah, and that gives a narrative way that has trouble like reading her mind because it's maybe just the way she thinks. Like even though it's not purely auditory, it's just like there's like all these different flavors to her thoughts because of the way she speaks.
And he has a hard time reading the ringleader's mind because he literally has like metal in his head or something. I think that helps shield his past. Yeah,
I think you either can do the metal in the head or you can do that. He used to be a mind reader and he knows how to like manipulate that stuff. Or a little of both.
Totally.
But yeah, I like it. I feel like this is a completely different direction for the same type of character.
Spiritually has the same core to it.
Yeah, definitely. So I hope our audience has enjoyed it because I have, because this was a story where I was like, man, I like the spine of this story, but it needs some flair. And obviously this was written years ago by me. So if I took another pass at it, I'm sure the next version would have come out better, but it's fun to juggle this around and kind of come up with this Tim Burton-y. My natural reaction is not normally to go Tim Burton style. That's just not the kind of stories.
Well, it's funny because I feel like your style is very Tim Burton adjacent. Like you said, you like one wild thing. It's just, I guess, Tim's approach to those types of things. But I think the big homework here for you is to figure out a way to make the circus thing modern, whether it's like they're all live streaming or something that's like hacky off the top of my head, but something along those lines, or even if it is a traveling thing, just make it feel different and modern rather than, this old school thing. Or if it feels more comfortable, then just lean into that.
It could be funny if like his traveling little circus is somewhat successful, but also not like super successful. Like I imagine like this kid like on an iPad like walking around, and then the mom's like, "Honey, look," and he like looks up, and there's like a stretchy man who's like literally like stretching, and the kid's like, "Huh," and like looks back down at the iPad and like just keeps going.
That's
like
funny,
So like kids, like I feel like that would be a struggle of a circus of people being so desensitized and so plugged in that that's
good. I like that in the modern world you see it struggling. He's like, we do a lot of bar mitzvahs.
But no, I like it a lot, man. I think it's a fun story, and I think we haven't even tapped into all these other side characters that have powers, and I think there could be a lot of fun and a lot of stuff that could be explored there. But I appreciate you taking the time to dig up this old story of mine and chat about it.
Of course, it was a lot of fun.
So as far this original story was just called Cadby, because it was more just this guy. I think it's an interesting, unique title. You also said earlier modern circus, and I really like that too because that's interesting because you don't really think modern circus as much. So something exploring that, or Cadby in the modern circus, or something that's kind of Mr. McGorham's Wonder Emporium.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on potential titles or ideas to explore?
So I think Cadby is probably the place to go since he's the central character and it's about him finding his identity. So you really can't do much better than that. It's so perfectly encapsulates it. Plus you picked a really unique name that has a circusy kind of feel to it. It's like a candy, the Cadbury eggs and stuff like that. It makes me think of those sweet, kind of odd patterned things. So I think that's probably the place to go. But leaning into the mind reader thing, you could come up with some pretty fun titles. that, like about reading minds, about, like a book, something like that, somewhere where his ability is what's central. Read the room, whatever idiom you want, like read someone like a book. That's the whole like a book thing. But yeah, I would lean into that.
Yeah, I think I like Cadby, and it could be just Cadby, or I could shorten and it could just be called Cadby's Circus or something. Like, because you got a little bit of that alliteration, but I don't know if it muddies the water too much.
I think it's much cleaner to just go with his name. Because that fits with him in the town, that fits with him at the circus, anywhere. One of my favorite movies is Michael Clayton with George Clooney, and the whole idea is just, it's like, who is Michael Clayton? Who is he going to be? Is he going to be a good guy or a bad guy? That's basically the premise of the movie, and I think it fits very appropriately for this.
All right. Nice. I like it. Well, Cadby is the title for this one. And it still holds up.
And per our custom, we have this tiny little end segment, which we're thinking about calling Along the Lines. This is your story.
I applaud. That's a good name for this segment.
So it's time for Along the Lines, everybody. We have Cadby, and we have Cadby's creator, Tommy Antonucci, and future writer, hopefully. Can you give us a line from any character in Cadby?
Yeah, a line from the movie. I picture our ringleader guy just being just a weird goofball guy. And I picture him saying a line that's along the lines of, I'm like a dad, but better than a dad, because I pay you.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. Because that's funny. It's like, quirky.
I'm like your dad. I'm like a father figure to you. Like that's like a weird thing for that's a weird thing to like force upon someone. Like it's like normally
I can be like a father figure, but better because I pay you.
Yeah. I'm your father figure.
And say it. Here's your W-2, or W-4 or whatever it is.
Thank you all for listening to StoryFellas, a part of the Pemmican Studios podcast network. Check out our show notes for bonus material, links, and more. To find out more about our current projects, send us messages, and suggest ideas for the show, go to StoryFellasPodcast.com. If you liked what you heard, share the show with a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to grow this community. Until next time, go make and break those stories.